All right. Good evening, everyone. I apologize again for the last minute change in plans. I thank you all for being flexible. Just something came up that I was not able to get out of. So I'm just going to sort of convert this week's class into an online class. And I'm going to use this video to just sort of go over the topics for the week, and hopefully get everybody set up for the work for week number 3. As always, if you have questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I will get those answered for you, especially since we won't have the in real time, in-person time on the Tuesday evening that we would have had. So without further ado, let me just kind of dive into it. The first couple of weeks have been about kind of setting the framework for our instructional design projects. We talked about instructional design models themselves and did a little bit of look into what some of the common elements are in those instructional design models. And one of those elements sort of falls under the general category of analysis. That before you start designing your actual instruction or creating materials or thinking about assessments or even setting goals, you need to do a careful assessment of the situation that you are designing the instruction for, just so you have a really good grasp of what your constraints are that you're working under and what sort of circumstances you need to be designing for. So in a nutshell, that's the main focus of this week is analysis. We're going to look at needs analysis, or sometimes called needs assessment, and we're also going to look at uh, things having to do with audience analysis and context analysis and so on, um, for the week. So in any case, there was a reading from last week. I think that reading is going to cover a lot of the framework for this week, in terms of the needs assessment and context analysis and so on. So just kind of going through the work here. In terms of sequence of activities, I do have a class notes page for this week. Obviously, that was originally meant to be used during class discussion for those that would have been attending in person for the class tonight. I did put a few things on there, just sort of some main bullet points, both about context analysis and about needs assessment. So you can take a look at that page, but it's basically just a very quick overview summary of the reading from the past week. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we get into a couple of these subpages. Um, there's that. And then really the main work for this week is to begin creating the first phase of these ID projects, of these instructional design projects. The assignment page will be available this week, but you should not be turning phase 1 in yet. The phase 1 is going to include the stuff that we talk about this week in week 3, but it's also going to include topics that we talk about in week 4, which are going to be more about audience analysis and goal setting. So I assigned it, I put it out there this week, and all the guidelines are out there this week so that you can start working on that. You can start addressing the needs assessment piece and the context assessment piece. And then just know that next week you'll be filling in the other pieces and then actually submitting the phase 1 document at the end of that week. And there is a discussion forum for this week that is going to set us up for next week's discussion or topic, which is mainly going to focus around setting goals. So that's kind of the rough overview. Let me break it down and kind of go through it in a little more detail. So I will start on this notes page, which kind of looks backwards at the reading. First thing was about needs assessments. And really the bottom line about this whole topic is that there's really no point in even starting an instructional design if you can't identify a need for the instructional design. I know that sounds maybe obvious, but it is, it's sort of it's it's funny how often people go through the whole process of designing something for new instruction without really having a clear reason or need for doing so. So you've all been thinking about general topics. As you now start to get into it, you're going to want to narrow down that topic more kind of based on some kind of need. So you don't want to just be recreating something that already exists or something that's already working. You've got to figure out why, sort of the seed of why you are creating this instructional design. So within that, the reading basically broke down, and we're going to be using these two terms a lot, and you'll hear me use them in comments on your work and everything else. And that is innovation model and discrepancy model. And these are basically the two main ways or the two main types of needs that might drive why you would create an instructional design. The innovation model will come into play when there is something new being taught. It could be a new subject that's being added into a class. It could be a new skill that has not been taught in a class before. So the idea behind innovation is that it is something new. So that is definitely obviously a case where you would need an instructional design because there is no instruction that already exists for that thing in that class. So some of you, as you look at your topics and start thinking about this, might be, realizing, oh, well, in this particular topic, we are now doing this thing in a new way, or we've added this new piece into this unit that now needs needs an instructional design or something along those lines. So that's going to be sort of one direction that you could go in, and that's going to certainly influence some of the choices and so on that you make down the road. You're basically going to be, creating a new path. You're not retreading something that's already there. You're actually, developing a whole new direction to go in with the instruction. The other side is the discrepancy model, which generally speaking is the more common one to come up in instruction. And in this case, there is existing instruction in place. The students are going through some kind of, education on a particular topic, but something is not working. You are not getting the results out of the student work that you think you should be getting. So a lot of times this comes after a unit has been taught or a lesson's been taught, and you're reviewing assessments, and you're realizing that, how come, three-quarters of the kids in the class, failed the final assessment. So that would be a red flag for a discrepancy model where there is existing instruction, but it is not doing the job that it's supposed to be doing. And that would be another signal that a new instructional design is needed or some kind of new way to approach it. So again, as you start to narrow down your topics, make sure that you can identify that the area that you are addressing in your instructional design plan falls into one of those two categories. Something that hasn't been taught before and needs a brand new plan, or something that is being taught but is not delivering the results that it should, and therefore we need to go back and come up with a different way of teaching it. So that's really what all of the needs assessment sort of boils down to is you've got to have a problem. You've got to have a reason to go through the whole process of instructional design. Because if there's no reason, if the students are doing what they're supposed to do and they're performing the way they're supposed to perform, and you're not adding anything new into the class, then there's no real reason to go back and reinvent the wheel if it's already doing what it's supposed to do. So that's the needs assessment in a nutshell. And obviously the chapter went into a lot more detail about some of that. The other piece that we're going to look at this week is context or learning environment analysis. This is not really about the students. We're going to talk about that next week. That's an audience analysis. This is more all of the things that surround the instructional design plan that are going to influence it. So this would be learning things about, what standards do you need to fit this instruction into? Is this instructional design going to be fitting into an existing curriculum? You know, does it feed off of something that is coming before it? Um, you know, what are the characteristics of the school that it's being taught in? Sort of what's the basic philosophy of instruction in the school? So basically, you just want to be able to describe a detailed picture of the context of the environment of the setting in which this instruction is going to take place. So, you know, that's going to influence your decisions along the way. It might influence what types of materials you can use. You know, if you're in a learning environment that stresses a particular style of learning, you're going to want to try to tie into that. If this is fitting into an existing curriculum, then you're going to want to identify where does this, you know, what does this feed off of? What are the students going to know coming into this? And then what piece are you going to be adding in the instruction? So these are the two pieces of the instructional design plan that you're going to be starting to think about and starting to write up this week in that instructional design document in that phase one. So, so that's what I want you to focus on. Those are really the two main the ideas for this week. And I can certainly, if you have questions or concerns about either one, or you're not sure what kind of a model your instructional design falls under, or you know how much detail you need for the context analysis, don't hesitate to reach out. Issues of how much detail to go into, and this always comes up with audience analysis too. It is going to kind of depend on your situation, but basically you just need to ask yourself, what do I need to know? What is going to influence my decisions about this instructional design that come from the environment that it's being taught in? So that'll kind of give you limits. I mean, obviously, you could probably keep going out into larger and larger communities in terms of analyzing them for this. But if you just kind of ask yourself, you know, what do I need to know? What information do I need to have in hand as I head into designing this instruction that I need to know that are going to help influence things. So that's just again kind of a look back at the reading from last week and some of the main overview from that. So where we're taking that, oh, and I should point out there is a link here. This is to a document that is about discrepancy model. That's the kind of model that this particular document is focusing on. It does come uh, from Office of Migrant Education. I didn't. I'm not picking it because of sort of where it came from, but it is one of the more insanely complete kind of documents that I've ever come across that really digs into the whole concept of needs assessment. It is a very long document. I do not expect you to read through the whole thing, but particularly in the opening sections, like here starting on page 5, they really talk about you know, some of the key definitions as you're doing a needs assessment. So that might be useful to look through. They talk about a model of how to do a needs assessment, so that might be worth looking through. So kind of this opening section has some good information in it, but further down in the document, it really kind of gets into the weeds of specifics and details. But I figured I'd throw this out there just in case any of you really likes to geek out on this, on getting into data collection and things like that, that this is kind of a really detailed document about doing needs assessments. Again, mainly from the discrepancy model side, where there's an issue that's been identified and you're trying to, you know, analyze what that issue is. So beyond that, well, yeah, let me talk about the forum. I'll just take these sort of in order. So the forum for this coming week is forward looking. It's really to kind of set the stage for discussions and conversations next week. We are going to be taking a look next week at both audience analysis, but then also goal setting, which is kind of the final step of your analysis phase. What you want to be able to do when you come out of your analysis piece is have clearly defined goals that are going to then drive the rest of your instructional design in terms of how you're going to instruct, what kinds of materials you're going to use, what kind of assessments you're looking for, really where do you want students to be at the end. So we're going to talk specifically about a framework called a SMART goal. I know many of you may already be familiar with this type of goal. SMART is an acronym. The S, the M, the A, R, and T all stand for something. So I'm giving a brief overview of it here. There is a link to a more detailed kind of look at the SMART goal. For our discussion this week, I just have a few questions down here. You don't have to address all of them, but kind of just to get you thinking. Have you used SMART goals? How have you used them? Did they work for you if you have used them? If you've used other goal setting frameworks, maybe talk about those. And maybe just the general importance of why you think it might be important to use a framework for setting goals. So the difference this week with the forum is this is going to be a one-thread forum. So I've started the thread right here. It's got all the instructions and everything in it. So everything that you post is going to be a reply to this thread. And that way, since we're really just discussing one topic here, that way we're all contributing to the same conversation instead of having 18 different conversations about 18 different things. So for this week, somebody will have to start it off with an initial post or initial reply, and then from there on, you can either contribute sort of new replies, or if somebody has posted something that you want to respond to, you can reply to their post. And as always, just kind of keep the conversations going. Just check back in regularly, see what direction the conversation's going in, see if you have anything to contribute to it. But this assignment is really about sort of preparing for next week, when we will be talking again about audience analysis and goal setting. So the last two pieces here are the assignment details for this phase one. And then this is where the last thing here is where you'll actually upload your final document for phase one. But again, this is not due this week. We still have to get through next week's material before you'll have enough information to complete phase one. But this will be where you submit it, and you just click on it. You can upload your file and just submit it from there. But I put the assignment details themselves in a separate page. So as we talked about at the beginning of the course, the instructional design projects are going to be done in 4 phases. You will write each phase individually and submit it individually. So we can kind of focus on one piece of the instructional design process at a time. And then at the end, you'll be taking those 4 pieces, or maybe 5, there's a little bit of a 5th one, and basically just assembling them into your final instructional design document. So this is just phase one. It will get us up to having goals set. That's where it will sort of end. So it's analysis and goal setting. So this just kind of gives the overview for what is going to be contained and sort of roughly how much you're writing on each. I say aim for 2 to 4 paragraphs for each subtopic. I'm not usually a huge one for setting like length limits on things or requiring people to write a certain amount. Whatever gets you the information that you need to get in there is what you should aim for. But just for those of you that like to have a rough idea of what I'm looking for, roughly 2 to 4 pages or so two to 4 paragraphs per each of these subtopics. So the 2 that you can start working on this week are the needs analysis piece, and there's sort of some guiding questions here for you to think about. What is the problem you think exists? Do you think it's a discrepancy model or a innovation model? And then there's sort of some sub questions related on, depending on which of those 2 you think you're going to be following. And then in terms of the context analysis, talk about, who the instructors are that you plan are going to be using this instruction. It could be you, it could be your department, it could be you're designing it for just generic 10th grade English teachers out there in the world. Does this fit into existing curriculum? what is the framework that it's fitting into, or is there an instructional theory that it has to fit into? What are the characteristics and beliefs of the learning environment? So that would get into whether the school that you're designing this for has a particular philosophy of instruction that you're trying to tie into. So just whatever you can say about the context, about the environment in which the teaching is going to happen. And then, like I said, next week we're going to talk about audience analysis. So you don't need to work on that this week. And same thing with instructional goals. You don't need to set those this week. We will be discussing more about that next week. And then the final piece I'm going to ask you to include in each of the phase documents, but it's a separate thing. This is not meant to be part of the instructional design, is to include a paragraph or two of reflection. And this is you reflecting on the process of creating the instructional design. So, you can talk about how you incorporated certain things, or if you found a particular approach useful, or a particular concept useful as you were developing your instructional design plan. You can talk about that. For phase one, how did you pick your topic? What led you to feel like this subject area needed an instructional design, and so on. So again, you may not be able to write this whole thing until you've done the rest of the phase, but you can probably start thinking about what you would write in that reflection piece. So again, that's not meant to be part of your instructional design, but it's a way for me to kind of check in and see what kind of thought processes you went through as you developed each of the phases. So, like I said here, the due date is not for a couple of weeks. So this is not to be turned in this week. You will be submitting it to that assignment page that I showed you. There's some specifics here, sort of typographic details. I'm asking that everyone submit everything in PDF format, only because PDFs will open inside of Blackboard. So when I go to assess these and give comments, the PDF documents just open right in Blackboard. I can look at them there. I can add commentary to them. I can add notes. If you submit a Word document, then I have to download it, open it up in Word, and I don't have the ability to do the same commentary in Blackboard. So any modern word processor can export files as PDFs. In Word, you just go to File, Save As, and then you select PDF as the format. And then that would be the document you would submit. I'm asking you to be consistent in terms of naming the documents. So this first one would be your last name, first initial, and then ID phase one. And also include your name in the document along with your topic as the title of the document. You do not need to include a cover page. This is not an official, what am I trying to say? What's the word I'm looking for? This is not an official, gosh, I'm blanking on the word, educational paper. This is not a long, you don't have to be using your, man, I'm blanking out. You all know what I'm talking about. The guidelines for writing, the formatting of a paper, and so on. This is more informal. But with that said, I do want you to double space everything, use 12-point font, et cetera, et cetera. That just gives me room to put in comments and kind of link the things. Put in section headers, basically your needs analysis, context analysis, et cetera, just so that I can keep track of where, what topic you're working on. And as I said, overall length is going to really depend on your specifics, but with 2 to 4 paragraphs for each subtopic, that I don't know what that's going to end up with, but you're probably looking at roughly, I don't know, 4 to 6 pages total, something like that. So it's not meant to be huge, tons and tons of pages, but that's there. So in any case, that's the overview of sort of what you should start working on this week. But I know I've said it already, but just to reinforce, it is not due next week. Really, this is just getting a start on the first half of phase one, and then you will be completing the second half of phase one in week 4. All right, I think that is basically the overview for the week. So a little bit of a look backwards and a look forwards. This will really be the week where you start actually taking the first steps on those instructional design projects. Hopefully, you've had some good feedback from the discussion forum on the topics. I will be adding my own thoughts into that forum over the coming week. It wasn't really due till tonight, so I didn't want to start writing things until everybody had a chance to get things written in. But I will be taking a look at those this week and maybe throwing some comments back your way as well if I see anything that sticks out to me in terms of maybe suggestions on your topic selection. But yeah, so really it boils down to starting work on that phase one. You've got the one discussion forum about SMART goals. If there's anything you haven't completed from previous weeks, just make sure you're staying up with that work. And once again, as always, and particularly because I wasn't able to do the in-person meeting tonight, please reach out with any questions or concerns you have. I always do, have opportunities to set up video conferences with you individually. If you want to meet with me more face to face and talk about something, I'm available for that. Or you can just email me, or whatever works for you. So I think with that, I'm going to wrap this up. This probably went on a little longer than I meant to, but rather than splitting it into a couple videos, I figured it'd be better just to have it all in one place. And good luck with the week. And I do plan on, being back on WebEx next Tuesday night at 7:20. I'll look at my schedule. I know I was planning on being on campus this week. I'll look at my next week and see whether I might be able to make it on campus next week instead. But I will let everybody know about that later in the week. All right. Thank you all. Thank you again for your flexibility and understanding with tonight's class. And good luck and enjoy the rest of your week.